Hey friends, welcome to the deck, and I hope that the weather where you are is half as nice as it is here in Michigan here on this Saturday evening. I'm excited to talk to you just a little bit about Jesus today, but I had a little bit of a story. I was out riding my bike yesterday, and I was just flying. I was on the gravel trails. I'm going hard. I'm getting this big hill, and I'm just plowing down this hill as fast as I can. I'm breathing, I'm puffing, I'm going. And all of a sudden, this thing flies into my mouth, hits my tongue really hard, and flies back out again. And it ended up being a bee. And it struck my tongue so hard, stung me 2 or 3 times, and got out of my mouth before I could even know what was happening. I mean, I couldn't believe it. Next thing you know, I'm riding along, and my tongue's starting to swell up, and my jaw is starting to hurt. And I'm going, man, I never knew that a bee could sting that quick. I never knew that could possibly happen. I learned something new every time now that I take a hill. I'm going to keep my mouth closed, or at least I'm going to do something to be aware of the pain that could come if I don't leave it open. I learn something new every single time that I get out on a bike. And as I teach and as I talk to you about Jesus, I feel like as I look at it and as I study and as I read about Jesus, I learn something new about him all the time. I talked to you about 3 weeks ago about who is Jesus to you. And then I talked about who Jesus was as a God who came in the form of man, who came in the form of humility and of love and of service and of caring and of kindness, a God that created all things, deciding to come to us in a way we could understand. But today, I think of this idea of a rebel Jesus. Every Christmas, Jackson Brown has a song that is played on my I was going to say DVD player or CD player, but I don't use any of those things. It comes on my speaker, and it's called Rebel Jesus, and it talks about Jesus being this rebel of a human being. And I hear so many other people say Jesus was radical and Jesus was a rebel, but every time I read about Jesus, he seemed so calm. He seemed so under control. He didn't seem rebellious. He seemed at peace. He seemed like he was not a rebel. Now, as I look at the life of Jesus, I begin to understand what they meant by rebel. First of all, Jesus was completely Jewish. In the book of Matthew, it starts, and the first thing they tell us about Jesus is his lineage. As every Jew would know, every person in the lineage tracing themselves back to their original heritage in the Jewish faith. Very, very important for a Jew to be able to do that. Very, very significant. The Jews were very prideful about God's promises for them and about the way God used them and about the way they followed the rules and followed the laws and followed the Sabbath codes and laws, the way they followed the temple rules, the way they followed. Very, very prideful and very resistant to change. They were a people that lived lives that were completely under control. In other words, controlled by this set of laws and lineage that had happened. And every single Jew anticipated the coming of the Messiah. Every single Jew, from the minute you could almost think you were being taught that someday God would send a Messiah to earth. That Messiah was Jesus. And Jesus said so much. And others identified him as a Messiah. But Jesus was nothing like the Messiah the Jews wanted. He was not, in their minds, he was not this powerful, thunder-wielding, people dispersing, take control, take power, take rule, place those in power. He was not the kind of Messiah that came in what they believed was power. Jesus came as a humble servant. Jesus came as someone who loved the sick and the poor and the left out. Jesus came as one who was wise and loving. Now, for the Jews, for the Messiah to be wise and loving and kind would be radical, would be crazy. Another thing about Jesus was He was a Roman who lived in Palestine. He was Jewish in the Roman society, in the Roman culture, and he was raised in Palestine. And in Palestine, my cat, and in Palestine, he was Jerusalem, particularly. They were a very, very different people than the Romans who surrounded them. The Romans at that time, under Augustus, they were at peace. They were optimistic. They were in charge of almost the whole world. But in Palestine, where Jesus grew up, there was rebellion. It was the only province within the Roman Empire who was constantly in revolt because they would not accept multiple gods. They would not accept Roman law because they had their own law. In fact, it is believed that between the years 67 and 37, that over 150,000 Palestinians, Jewish Palestinians, were killed in rebellion against the Roman Empire. These people that Jesus was born into, in this area where he was born, were people that were rebellious by their very nature to resist the Roman Empire. But Jesus was a radical in that Jesus came and he didn't talk about the Roman Empire, didn't talk about the government. He came bringing peace, caring for others, speaking truth, and being able to live in such a way as people could not look away. This rebel Jesus, who was a Messiah that lived by love and by care and by wisdom, this radical Jesus who decided rather than talk down the government or to control the government, was going to be a person that dealt with individuals and dealt with individual hearts. This is a radical human being. This is a radically different than the people around him, radically different than his time period, because God was showing us another way. This week, I want you to think about our world. I want you to think about revenge and about anger and about getting even. I want you to think about being harsh and about caring for your own and about not liking those outside of your area. I want you to think about that. And I want you to think that there was no room for that in the life of Jesus, and there's no room for that in us. Try this week to listen. Try this week to understand. Try this week to be kind. Try this week to be the kind of person that stands out because you're radically different. You're radically different because Jesus showed us that love and that caring and that kindness and that truth were the answer. Now, I'm not saying you just roll over for everything. I'm not saying that you just get walked on. But what I'm saying is we respond to the things in our world in a different way, and you will have so much attention cast on you that when you tell them it's because of Jesus, it will make a difference. God bless. Have a great week following the radical Jesus.